Hello, my name is Matt Giordano. I'm a yoga instructor, and my focus when I teach is to help my students, and of course when I help myself, to learn the body through the asana practice. Rather than learning a bunch of poses, I think it's beneficial to really try to learn segments of the body. So what I'm going to offer today is how to get to Galavasana, which is like flying pigeon pose. However, the techniques that I offer is more important than the pose itself. So see if you can really create an understanding in your body of the techniques, and over time the poses will come, or the pose Galavasana will come for sure. So let's start. The first pose I would work with is just generally a lunge pose. So you can step 1 foot forward and place your hands on your front knee. There's a couple of movements to work on in the pelvis. One is anterior tilt, where the low back arches and the back of the pelvis lifts. And the other one's posterior tilt, where you can tuck your tailbone underneath and the front of the pelvis will lift up as a result. Both are incredibly beneficial and necessary through your body to have full range of motion and strength. So you can work back and forth, kind of like cat and cow. You can inhale, arch, and exhale, scoop underneath. If you do this a few times, you can feel a difference in muscles. When you anterior tilt, your low back muscles, your upper buttocks engages. When you posterior tilt, your lower buttocks engages. And then you can switch sides, do that on the other side. And then secondly, take it into the next pose, into a low lunge. So first, we get the stretch of the groins in this pose a little bit more actively. I'm going to recommend to keep the back toes tucked underneath so that as a result, you'll have more capacity to limit the external rotation in the thigh and to use the ball mount of your back foot to keep the back thigh turned in. So you can just work on the rotation of the inner back thigh. Now, depending on your body type, but most of us in this pose, because of the tightness of the psoas and the thighs, the pelvis will fall more into an anterior tilt. So we're going to work on is a little lift from the pubic bone upward without falling back and without opening the hips. So try that a few times. Just kind of lift the pubic bone upwards and then really sit down, lift upwards. And what you want to be feeling also in addition to the abdominals engaging is the buttocks engaging. So as you lift up, your buttocks engages, just like you did in the lunge pose. Except now when you lift up, you'll feel a lot more of a stretch in the thigh and in the inner groin, which will help us in our flying pigeon pose. Okay, do that on the other side. And then we go to, the next pose I would do would be actually pigeon pose, except not the sleepy pigeon that many of us love at the end of our yoga class. More of an active pigeon that could help us find strength through range of motion. So we'll start with the left shin forward. And when you take your left shin forward, try to keep both sides of your pelvis evenly off the ground so that you're not leaning to either side, but you have your left hip and your right thigh up off the ground. And then from there, there's a couple things you can learn in your body in this position that can be really helpful. One, you'll notice I'm starting with a pointed foot. This could be flexed as well if your shin is 90 degrees. But either way, the ankle bone is lifted off the ground. Now, if that's something new to you, that's going to be very challenging, meaning the muscles in the outer shin might be a little bit more weak. And to build strength just takes a little bit of time and an actual will. Continue to do it. So what you can do to start is you use your own hand to pull up the heel or pull up the ankle. This is called everting the ankle or everting the foot, and create space underneath. From that strength, see if you can then draw upward through the pubic bone so you feel a little bit of that engagement of your left buttocks while you're in the stretch. From there, activate the muscles of your core and breathe into your upper back so there's a fullness. If you can hold this, great. You can stay right here. You might take blocks and come up a little bit higher, or you might just take your hands up, kind of like a lunge pose. You'll notice that my back foot is tucked and my back thigh is not rolling out, it's staying turned in. See if you can really work those muscles, turning the thigh bone in and keeping the pubic bone up, keeping the back ribs up, pushing down into your knee and in the pinky toe. And then we can switch sides. Finally, after you've switched and done both sides of each pose, the prep for Galavasana is a fun one, and it's a very useful pose because unlike Pigeon, that requires a tremendous amount of strength and resistance against gravity, you have an advantage because you're more upright in a more comfortable position that your body is more used to. So similar to chair pose, except you take one foot, we'll take the right ankle that's round to start, over the knee. Here's a good place to actually practice the inversion and eversion of the foot. Inverting the foot would mean the sole of the foot points up to the sky. It will look something like this, like a sprained ankle feel. And then the opposite, everting, is when you pull the pinky toe side of the foot down. In this case, you can flex the foot, meaning dorsiflexion, where you have like an L shape at the shin and ankle. Once you have the everted foot and the pinky toe is pulling back, we're going to work on a few different things. One, try to drop your right hip and see what that feels like. Your left hip will go out to the side. Two, squeeze in the left hip and pull up the right side of your buttocks. So you're actually going to angle your pelvis on a diagonal. And once you have the angle where your right buttocks is lifting, then you'll feel the outer left hip muscles are fully active. At the same time, just check in. Did my foot lose the eversion? Keep the everting. And then from there, if it's accessible, you come down either onto blocks or maybe onto your fingertips. My personal preference is off on a diagonal. It'll get the whole fascial sheath from the hip all the way through the right side of the body. Keeping this lift in the right sit bone up, try to push out through the right knee and out through the right hip to activate the muscles of the outer hip and to stretch them at the same time. Keep the eversion of the ankle and take a few breaths. Keep lifting, right sit bone up and out. And when you feel you've been in there for a sufficient amount of time for you to awaken your muscles, your joints, and come on up. Once you've done those 4 poses, assuming that you've warmed up to those poses, meaning I would recommend doing some sun salutations and some other warrior twos and such, like a general warm-up for a yoga class before going into the next pose, before even doing those 4 poses. But once you've done those 4, Galavasana can be approachable in a couple of ways. Especially if you're at home, what I would recommend is you can kind of pile up a couple of books and stand on books, or if you have blocks, lucky you, you can stand on yoga blocks. But for now, I'll demonstrate, since I don't have any yoga blocks on me, I'll demonstrate without the blocks. You can imagine I'm standing on a hard surface that's a little bit elevated. It'll just make the whole thing easier. And the way we'll start is we'll go with the right ankle this time to start. Evert your foot and widen the back of the pelvis. So you're going to pull the sit bone out to the side. Then slowly come down to the position you were just in, like the prep. Now, you're going to do everything that I told you not to do a moment ago. What you'll do is invert the foot and drop the hip completely. What this will do is bring the ankle bone higher up towards your left armpit. Once you get that, you can hook, evert the foot back onto the arm. So I'm actually going to mirror that for you, since if you're following me, your left shin will drop, your left knee will drop. You'll invert the foot and you'll get your left armpit as high as possible, or as deep into the shin as possible, then evert right back into it. And the stronger you evert, the stronger the clamp will be, and you won't lose this. Then what you'll try to do is lift back up and widen the sit bone with the everted foot so that the knee goes right up in the armpit. This is a prep pose. You just can stay here, or the next step would be to lean into the pose, like so. You can tippy-toe your hands out in front. This is where the block comes in handy, so if you're elevated a few inches above, it'll be easier to descend upon the pose rather than trying to go forward. So here it is. We lean forward till the elbow comes right up over the wrist, meaning 90 degrees. Keep the foot everted. Hold. Reach forward with the top of the head. Widen the buttocks. Now, like you did in the pigeon pose, you're going to push down into your front shin and see if you can get a little bit of lift. A couple of hidden actions that are happening there is the shin is pushing down, which I just said, but there's a little bit of lift in the pubic bone, and there's a little bit of puff up in the upper back. Being able to move your pelvis through other poses, like your lunge poses, and in your actual lifted pigeon pose will help you when you get to this point. So knowing your body is going to help you with the pose before you even get to the pose. So that being said, for more beginner, you simply stay on a block and you simulate the pose. Your foot's on a block and you just lean forward, and the objective for you to start is just try to get your elbow over your wrist and hold there and look forward and just stay grounded. If you're feeling a little bit more at ease in the pose and you're starting to get the balance where your shin is up and you feel like, okay, I'm up there and I feel safe, then you can take the pose the next step and really elongate it. The tip that I have for you is keep bringing your elbow and your weight forward, and as you bring your weight forward, it'll be easy to extend the leg back. Now, where people tend to go wrong is that we don't move our weight forward and then we try to stretch the leg back and then we fall back. I'll show you an example of what would happen in that case. Again, knee down, foot up, evert, knee up, sit bone widen so you get the hip opening. Then once you're there, lean forward. Now if I didn't lean forward anymore and I tried to reach back, I would come down on the ground every time. So watch the subtle changes. You lean forward a little bit more. That makes the back leg light. I keep it internally rotated like the pigeon poses, like the Anjaneyasana, and then stretch back as I reach forward with the head. And there it is, Galavasana. Thank you so much. My name is Matt Giordano again. Thank you for practicing with me. Enjoy yourself. Please be safe.